Maybe the most distinct difference between traditional early childhood programs and the way we think about children in other settings and Montessori is the absence of fantasy classrooms in the Montessori prepared environment. Mickey Mouse does not live here. Powderpuff Girls and Power Rangers and whatever other examples I can use to date myself, they're all left at the door. Montessori's discouragement of fantasy characters is part of the carefully prepared classroom environment, and that need to be ever mindful of the important learning that happens throughout the child's experiences. Young children are credulous. They believe everything that they're told. The world is a new and wonderful place for the young child, and it's one that's marked by an ability to absorb seemingly endless amounts of information from the environment around them. Think about the 3-year-old child that you know who can name 12 different types of dinosaurs, or the child who can identify a variety of flowers at the supermarket. The world as it is remarkable enough, and there's no need to offer a 7-foot singing purple dinosaur if you can offer examples of real ones instead. Fantasy characters are not only unnecessary to small children, they also can be really damaging. Because children believe what they're told, and because they lack the experience to fit new information within accurate beliefs about how the world works, they're going to accept our fantastic explanations with as much legitimacy as if we offered them realistic ones. Are angels really bowling when it thunders? Do acorns and caterpillars really sing? These are images that confuse children's sense of what's real and what's reliable. Providing children with information about what's truthful and real, however, that establishes a critical foundation for their cognitive development. Simply put, we don't teach children lessons that we're going to have to unteach them later on. For many parents, this is a really difficult one to implement. Children are inundated with fantasy characters, from princesses to animated characters to talking sea sponges. When adults offer children false information to encourage fantasy, though, children learn that adults can't be trusted. And there will inevitably be a day when your child learns the truth and wonders why you weren't the one to provide it to him. We say, don't children love fantasy? Fantastic characters are usually more reflective of adults' misunderstandings of children's needs than of children's inherent interests. In much the same way that adults oftentimes think that children enjoy really loud, raucous environments, they also believe that children prefer pretend things to real ones. But if you look to your child's drawings, very young children tend not to draw imaginary characters. They draw their parents, or their siblings, or their homes, their pets. How many of your children cried the very first time that they saw Santa? How many of them hid behind your legs when an 8-foot mouse tried to greet them? Children develop a sense of confidence in the world because they have repeated experiences with reliable situations. Fantasy characters undermine those expectations by attributing skills or powers that are inconsistent with children's perceptions to individuals or characters with whom they can never really interact. But don't children love to pretend? Yes, of course, children pretend play all the time. And in their pretend play, children are trying out new roles. They're experimenting in a safe environment with new experiences, and they're building up on their social repertoire. Many of the practical life materials in a Montessori classroom, they take advantage of this natural inclination in children. They offer the same types of skills that they would otherwise simply pretend to do, and they allow children to develop those instead using real tools. But this natural inclination to pretend shouldn't be confused with a desire for fantasy. Children want to know what the world really is. They want to know what it's really like, and they use pretend play to experiment with their world and with their contribution to it. So how in the world are children going to develop their imaginations in environments that don't have fantasy? Well, fantasy and imagination are very simply just not the same thing. Fantasy offers children impossible scenarios that can never come true. And fantasy contradicts a child's developing understanding of how the world works. Imagination is just the opposite. Imagination draws on a child's understanding of the world and tends towards that deeper reasoning that we're looking for in them. The Montessori classroom is filled with opportunities for imagination. Consider the beautiful pictures of children around the world in the cultural materials, or the globes that symbolize the continents on the face of the earth. These imaginative opportunities to see similarities and relationships in the environment around them, they offer children a detailed understanding of how the world works and of their unique role inside of it. So understanding the world is one thing, but what about children's creativity? Some people will argue that fantasy engages children's creativity. If you think, though, about all the great artwork of theater, music, visual arts, or dance, all the things that have spoken to you, what's universal about great art is that it speaks to the human experience, even when we can't define what that experience is. Artists are able to create because they're able to imagine, not a world that reflects mass-produced fantastic impossibilities, but one that includes the human experience and builds upon it. This is true in all creative endeavors, from music to scientific advancements. Indeed, an active imagination is necessary, regardless of whether your child is destined for artistic greatness. Complex cultures have more words, more detailed metaphors, more descriptive language. These qualities in both cultures and individuals reflect the ability to imagine and to define what's in our thoughts in ways that we can communicate to other people. And initially, these are really simple, as instinctive action to explore the environments that build a store of mental images. As the mind develops, those mental images are given names. They're ordered, they're associated with other images, and they emerge as really powerful thoughts. An infant may initially smile at any woman's face, but eventually will come to prefer the distinct face of that one that they label mama. From this inborn curiosity about the environment comes a drive to gain a real knowledge and to develop language that shapes that knowledge and allows us to communicate it to others. So never, not never. Dr. Montessori was very clear about the inappropriateness of fantasy for very young children, but she didn't oppose it as entertainment for the older child. A general rule is that children are able to access whatever entertainment they're able to read and understand independently. It's one of the ways that you can see if your child is thinking abstractly enough to be able to make sense of the difference between fantasy and reality. Some of the most popular modern children's books are terribly frightening for young children, but they can be enjoyed without any stress at all by older children. Typically, after about the age of 6, children are able to understand the difference between what's real and what's fantastic, and they're no longer confused by it. So remember, children learn from their experiences, regardless of whether or not you label those experiences educational. While you may have chosen Montessori for your young child, it's really important that you make your child's experiences outside of school as thoughtful as the ones they'll have during the day. Avoid the TV as much as possible for children under 6. If you do have screen time, do it as a family, and be sure that you use it as an opportunity to talk with your child about what they understand about what you're seeing together. Cartoons are generally inappropriate, even though they're the most heavily marketed to small children. Look instead for videos that show children engaged in real activities. Likewise, select books that describe experiences that could happen, or provide photos or information about the world in an accessible format for young children. These are opportunities for you to connect with your child in a meaningful way, to share family stories, to show videos of your travels, to show photo albums of aunts and uncles and cousins. Offer literature that elicits questions like, how do you think she felt about what happened? Or what would you have done in that situation? And you can engage your child's understanding of the world and of how they can affect it. Draw attention to that which is wonderful in our reality, from images through a microscope to what they see in the night sky. And you may find, like your child already knows, that the world is wonderful enough, just as it is, and that you'll be building a trusting relationship with your child in the meantime.